Radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right. Good evening. How you doing? That's right. It's Fade to Black. Yeah. Today's March 13th, 2025. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Yeah. You know what's going on. Let's do this, man. Let's have a good time. Today is my Friday. Yeah, not for you. So let's do this, man. And here's the crazy thing. Yeah, today is my Friday. And normally I look forward to it. I'll stay up late on Thursday night and watch a movie and do all of that stuff and enjoy myself and sleep in past, 9 o'clock in the morning and do all and not tomorrow. Nope, I'm in the dentist chair at 9 a.m. So I got to be in bed early. I got to get up early and just have a super fun day tomorrow. Yeah, there you go. Before we get started tonight, I just wanted to say I was in the chat, and it is hailing right now. I live in the Mojave Desert. I shot a video. I'll post it later. It's hailing. And I was out shopping. I was at the local market down the street, and I went in, did my thing. I came out, pop, 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 pop in my getting. It's like, oh my God, it's hailing, and the sound of hail hitting your head is unique. Yeah, so maybe we'll get some rat-a-tat-tats tonight on the roof during the show. That'll be fun, kids. All right. And you can help support our show and everything that we do around here. Just get yourself a Fade to Black t-shirt. Paul Anthony Wallace has his. Paul, you better get it ready. Yeah, I want you to show everybody when I pull you in. All right. Yeah, that's pretty cool. A great week on Fade to Black. Monday night, we had Jason Offit with us, Cryptid Encounters. Tuesday night, Preston Dennett was with us. He's always great. His new book, Humanoids and High Strangeness. Last night, Ellie Molina was with us, and we were talking about how to develop the psychic abilities in your children. And tonight, Paul Anthony Wallace is here, and we're going to be talking about, a lot of stuff. It's Paul, but what the heck is going on with contact? What is the truth about ET contact? We're going to mess around with that tonight. And I've got 5 major events coming up. And next week, the week after, Rise of the Guardians. That is March 29th and 30th, 2025 in Sedona, Arizona. After that, I head straight out to the Midwest for the Contact Modalities Expo. And that is May 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, 2025 in Delavan, Wisconsin, Delavan Lake at the resort. Then back out here for Contact in the Desert, May 29th through June 2nd in Palm Springs, California. Then I head south to Peru with Brian Forrester for the Inca Celebration of the Sun, June 17th through the 27th, 2025. We have 2 tours this year, one in June, one in November. Then I head to the East Coast for the Psi Games. That's right, the Psychic Olympics, August 1st through the 3rd, 2025 in Charlottesville, Virginia. Yeah. And the links for everything that I'm doing in 2026, we're going to be adding some more stuff. But the links for everything are below. Get your tickets, and I'll see you out there somewhere in 2026. Now, tonight, let me get my foot switch right here. Tonight, Paul Anthony Wallace joins us. We're going to be talking about the truth of ET contact. And now he deals with ancient mysteries, UFOs, hidden knowledge, and he's been around the world. He lives in Australia, by the way. He's looked into the lost history of Viking connections, of course, symbols, and his discoveries are amazing. And we're going to go through all of that. And how does this stuff link the ancient stuff to today and UFOs? We're going to do all of that and much more. His links are below. We've got two for Paul on our website, on our social media, and in the description below. I'd like to welcome back to Fade to Black, the one and only Paul Anthony Wallace. Paul, good evening, man. How you doing?
G'day, Jimmy. I'm fantastic. It's great to be with you once again. I'm glad to hear you're surviving the hail in the Mojave Desert there.
Isn't that crazy? And
Yeah.
the mountains around me, this is the desert. I live in the desert. The mountains around me that are about a mile away, you know, surrounded by the mountains here, white. They're snow covered, you know, and,
Wow.
you know, in a couple of months, it's going to be 130 degrees. But yeah, yeah.
Enjoy.
Well, you know, it's, I have the seasons. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? You wouldn't think
that's
there are
nice.
seasons here. Yeah. And the past few years, I've had snow on Christmas.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well,
Yeah.
I'm in the subtropics. We don't really have seasons here, so that does sound like a novelty.
You know what you have in Australia? By the way, real quick, what part are you in?
Sunny Queensland. So literally in the subtropics.
Where is Queens? I mean, for those that don't know.
All right, the top right quarter of Australia.
Top right corner. Got you.
So we're on the East Coast.
Okay. Here's the cool part about Australia that most people don't know about. I'm sure you do. And if you don't, I'll be surprised. You guys, Ewans, see a different part of the universe than we do up here. Okay. Now, picture, I need something round. Okay. So here's my alien hacky sack. Let me change cameras. Alien hacky sack. Okay. So let's pretend this is the Earth. Okay. Got it?
Got it.
In North America, if I'm standing up, I'm standing like this. Okay. So I'm looking out here. In Australia, you're standing upside down. The moon, you see a different part of the moon than we do. And so we experience stuff up here that you guys don't. You guys see stuff we don't. Now, and I'll take it one step further. In the southern hemisphere in Australia, you can see 5 galaxies. Little pink smudges in the night sky. Up here, we see 1. Yeah, we see Andromeda. You guys don't. Isn't that crazy? And you think that we all see the same thing. We don't. And you guys got it better.
Yet it all boils down to it's worth a trip. Worth a trip. Come and have the experience. We're also in the future, of course. So
yeah, that's the other thing. You guys are all time travelers. Yeah. I was in Peru a few months ago, and we were standing out on the patio of one of the hotels, and I'm with the tour group, right? And somebody is looking up at the moon and turns to me and says, "Jimmy, something's wrong with the moon." I said, "What?" And I look, and he goes, "The man on the moon's not there." I go, "That's because you're looking at a different part of the moon than North America. You're in the southern hemisphere. You're looking at the moon from another angle, upside down. He goes, what? And I had to explain it to him. So what, you know what he did? He Googled it in front of me. Yeah. And found out I was right. But people don't understand that.
No, I had the same experience. I had the same experience first time I came here. I was traveling with a friend, and he was just very perturbed for a number of days, thinking, why is the moon looking so strange? And it took us a while to process the maths and realize, yeah, it's a different angle. We're looking at it from a different angle.
Completely different angle. And the difference between, if you're standing, right, you're standing on, and you're standing, you see two different sides, and it's crazy. And it's just perception. But if you are standing on a different part of a sphere, you're going to have a different view of the universe. It's crazy. It's crazy. I'm going to try to get to Australia next year, and you and I will have to hang out. But yeah,
Definitely.
yeah, I can't wait to get there.
You've got to come to Queensland. It's a beautiful place.
It's going to be great. So congratulations. Let me get this out of the way. Your books have been great. The success and the recognition from the community, it's got to make you feel pretty good.
It is really gratifying. I felt when I published the first in the Eden series that I was at the beginning of a wave, and that there was going to be a readership ready for new books on paleocontact. And when Escaping from Eden was released, from that time to this, I've just been riding that wave. The appetite for information about our past, about our place in the cosmos, is at a height that I've not seen in my life before. I think we're at a really interesting period where more people than ever before are questioning what they have believed about the universe, the things they were taught in school, the things they've been taught by their parents from the beginning. They're reaching a point of saying, yeah, but I want to know what's really going on. And I find the appetite for this kind of territory is phenomenal.
Well, it's easy with this community, and maybe most of the world, or it's getting easier to open up eyes. But we gotta knock over Neil deGrasse Tyson. We do that, and you know what? We've achieved something. But even scholars like himself are starting to change their tune, aren't they?
Well, I hope so. I mean, Neil, he is very eloquent. He's got great charisma, so he always gets invited onto the shows as the expert scientist. But, you know, he has his field, and then there are others who know stuff about other things. And so I do get frustrated from time to time when they're asking Neil deGrasse Tyson questions I think they should have put to me or to you, Jimmy.
I have said many times, I would love to have this conversation with Neil deGrasse Tyson, and it's not going to go well for him. And I'm not a PhD. I'm not a physicist, but I've been researching this subject for a long time, and I think I'm going to be on the right side of history in the end, and so are you. But it kind of got around to Neil. So I'm just going to say this. You can expect him on Fade to Black very soon.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah. The conversation is happening. And now I'm going to be respectful, but I just want to feel him out, because I think everybody throws him a softball. They do. They're intimidated. Well, you know what? The rest of the world, so many listen to him, but he's not the last word. But so many more would be interested in the subject if he just opened up how he truly feels. Forget about your fan base, Neil. What do you really think? And that's what I'm going to get to that.
Yeah, that will be a fun conversation. But, you know, it's so easy to be intimidated by people with PhDs. And I should say my books are full of references to people who do have PhDs in their fields. But, you know, the role of a broadcaster or a writer is different to the role of a tenured academic. And sometimes it has to be you or me to push the boat out and say, hang on, wait a minute. This is the data. This is what these PhD people have said and demonstrated. Aren't the implications of that this? And it's the writer or the broadcaster who pushes the conversation forward. And I hope I'm doing the academic community a service, because it means academics can sit around and say, what has this crazy Paul Wallace said now? And it means they can have a conversation about something that might otherwise be a bit taboo. And it allows them to say, well, he may have a point here, he may have a point there. And so we inch the conversation forward. But I think you've got to be prepared to take flack as a writer or a broadcaster. You will go onto territory that can't be backed up by 101 PhD theses because you're spearheading a conversation.
Well, but that is your job. And and it's certainly my job. What science and those PhDs have lost sight of over the years is that they are riding on the backs of giants. And those giants got to the thoughts that they had progressing science by thinking outside of the box. They didn't know it all. They didn't, and that's now today, you're not allowed to think outside of the box. That's heresy. You know what I mean? And it's a strain. And that's how we grew. I think that the best example, and I swear I've said this so many times, but it needs to be repeated. Isaac Newton was the exact opposite of the PhDs of today. And I say that because he was an alchemist, he was a religious scholar, he was a mathematician, he was a physicist, and a bunch of other esoteric things that he loved in research, but that allowed him to think into the bigger questions.
Exactly.
And today, it's not that kind of party. It's like we need to get back to that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he was a Renaissance man. The idea of the Renaissance man is that you have a curiosity about everything, the whole science of life, and you will apply your logic to all kinds of different areas and disciplines and sets of data. And it is different to today where, after your first and your second PhD, your field of expertise just gets narrower and narrower and narrower. Another, I could call him a Renaissance man, although it's out of time, would be Plato, who was a philosopher.
Oh, for sure.
Experiencer. And he's completely unashamed to say, I get this information from ancestral story, this from a transpersonal experience, this by applying logic to things we observe. And the work he did across all these disciplines has stood the test of time. It's still the foundation of Western philosophy to this day, 2,500 years later. And again, it goes back to having that curiosity about everything to do with life and bringing your skills and your logic to every field. And when you see the connections from one field to the next, that is when your whole paradigm can shift. And that's how it worked for me. I started off in a narrow field of Bible translation, hermeneutics, the principles of interpretation. And it was once I got out of that bubble and started traveling the world, listening to other ancestral story, and then paying attention to DNA research, archaeological research, neuroscience, that I could begin to connect the dots and say, hang on, there's
the Bible's wrong.
There's something else going on in the Bible.
Yeah, right.
I know you're teasing.
I'm making a bad joke. It was a bad joke.
But it was a matter of seeing, actually, there's other information in the Bible that we've glossed over, that we've mistranslated, that we've misinterpreted. And if we go back to the text and ask, have I read that right? Get back to the root meanings, and you begin to see the connections with Mayan, Mesopotamian, African, Norse, Indian story all around the world that reveals a different explanation of who we all are and what our place is in the universe. It was the connections that really got me going.
Yeah. And it's such an amazing point to bring up, because it doesn't matter. Okay, here's the thing. 6,000 years old or whatever. Let's put all of that stuff to the side. I'm not here to debate religion. But here's the crazy part. Every culture on this planet developed a religion. Everyone. And so you have to ask yourself, completely different too, right? But they were looking at the supernatural and trying to answer those fundamental questions with it. And is that part of our DNA, to have this wonderment of who we are and where are we going, right? And where do we come from and how do we get here, and what happens in the future? Is that part of our DNA? And religions fall out of that. I don't know. But every culture developed their own religion. Fascinating part of humankind.
That's true. On the one hand, yes, I think we are wired for that sense of awe and wonder, for that sense of connection. And there is science supporting the idea that there's a particular area of the brain that allows us to have these religious experiences. There's a particular hormone that is related to the meditative or mindful state. So yes, we're wired for that, but I think the story is many layered, because if you go back to the stories from out of ancient Sumer, Babylonia, Arcadia, and Assyria, there you've got stories of advanced beings who are wanting to press that religious button in us and to get us perceiving them as deities, because then if we serve them, we'll count it as a virtue instead of oppression. So our religious sensibilities can be manipulated, and that's been part of the human story in different ways, but all through the ages. And then mentioning the Sumerian, Babylonian, etc., what I find really interesting about the texts we can go to from those cultures is those texts are not religious texts. So there was no religion of the Anunnaki. There was no religion that grew out of those stories of origins. And it's one of the things that drew my attention to them, because you then have to ask, well, what questions were these stories written to answer? And they seem to be questions about, how did we learn how to do civil engineering? How did we learn how to do megalithic building? How did we learn mathematics? How did we first start to write things down? And so you've got those kinds of stories as well, which I think, because they're not asking you to do something or believe something or worship something, there's kind of an objectivity to them that I find quite appealing. And I found it very refreshing going to those texts after 33 years in church-based ministry, where it's all about religion and therefore you must, and obligations flowing from the text you're reading. And that was the beginning of my journey.
Let me jump in again. Another amazing point. So let's expand on that, if we may, because if you look at the Vedic text, I think they represent the same things that you're talking about right now. And then you go to China, look at China's ancient text, definitely wondering about who we are and our reasons for being here, and what the future is. But then go to Egypt. Look at that. Look at the Norse mythology, right? You just jump around. Maya. Look at these different. It's fascinating how technically these cultures should not have had any contact with each other, but you can connect the dots between all of them. That's just mind-blowing to me. And you know what? That should be a PhD in itself, right there.
Oh, for sure. And sometimes the overlaps are in areas of very precise detail. So, the nature of the craft that arrived after a devastation of the planet, the fact that they hover over floodwaters, and this hovering motif, you can find it in Filipino story, Nigerian story, Babylonian story, biblical story, the
Indian,
detail.
Vedic, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Native American story as well. All those elements of devastation, flooding, things in the sky that are hovering, beings that are not human, then doing the rehabilitation. These are all very unlikely stories to occur coincidentally from culture to culture. And Jimmy, as you rightly say, there's no evidence that these cultures were copying this story from one another. In fact, in my books, I show that it really is quite separate, independent tellings of a visual memory. And the evidence would seem to be they saw similar things, and then they found their own language, their own metaphor to describe it. But the visual of what you're having described to you is the same. It is the same intervention that's being recalled.
You know, one of the best examples, not the best, but, you know, one of the best examples of that, and I'm not cracking a joke here, flying carpets. Think about that. Where does that come from? And what were they seeing?
Yes.
You know, I don't think.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Flying carpets. And then in my new book, The Eden Enigma, I get onto flying shields.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Same.
Three cultures.
That's my point. Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Completely separate cultures, different continents, different eras, and they all talk about flying shields. And when you bear in mind that the shields they're describing were circular shields, so look at it sideways on, circular, with a bump in the middle. It's the classic profile of what we would call a flying saucer, but they call it flying shields because that's what it looked like. And they tended to turn up in moments of military conflict. So this is where that language comes from. That's what gets painted or described in stories all around the world. It's in Roman story. It's in Greek story.
Limited vocabulary, limited language. You know, they did the best they could.
Yeah.
You know, flying shields, okay. Flying carpets, you know, it's today we would call it drones or whatever, you know, UAPs. But that's all. If you take the fundamental of all of this, it seems that no matter what we're talking about, life after death, ghost, interdimensional beings, little green men, this conversation has been going on for 10,000 years or more.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Certainly 10,000 years, because I think there was a very significant intervention at that time that was about helping humanity to reboot after the Younger Dryas Cold period. And I think a lot of the stories we think of as creation stories are really stories of intervention from that time that were about rehabilitating our ecosphere.
Now, if we look at today, we're going to jump back into ancient history a lot tonight, but today, you would think that 1947 and 1952 was a peak of UFOs. 1958, 1960, 61, 63, 68, right? We had these huge moments in sightings and numbers. Today, what the hell is going on? What is it that we are seeing?
I think what we're seeing right now, we're seeing a lot of tech that probably belongs to the units within the aerospace industry, or what President Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex, being brought out to play. And I think some of what's in the sky is actually a distraction from phenomena in the sky that are not ours. Because if you remember the paper that was produced to brief the Senate in 2021 regarding UAPs, that paper just looked at US military sightings of UAPs or UFOs. What was it, from 2004 to 2021? And they said in that period, US defense activity was interfered with on average once every 6 weeks. by UAPs or UFOs. Well, that is quite a frequency to maintain for 17 years flat. So there was already a lot going on at that point. And then, of course, in the last 12, 18 months, we've seen a rapid acceleration of anomalous phenomena in the sky. As I say, I think some of it is ours, some of it may be misdirection, but I think it's misdirecting us from phenomena that are not ours and that we can't or don't want to explain.
And then people are going to see what they want to see too. And so we
Well,
have that.
yeah, that happens as well. You start looking for something and you see what you expected to see. So that can muddy the waters. But there have been plenty of cases where US defense has tried to track, analyze, retrieve some of these anomalous craft, and they haven't been able to. So that raises quite a few questions.
Yeah, at the peak of great point. Because at the peak of the drone stuff in New Jersey, like when it was like crazy town, I wrap the show. I go into my kitchen and I'm cooking dinner, right? Got like a ribeye steak and a cast iron pan, pss, 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 minding my own business. And my phone is sitting on the countertop, right? Okay, sitting right here. I belong to a neighborhood watch app that the neighbors started here. And when it goes off, I look, if I bother to look, it's a lost cat, a lost dog, a found cat, right? Okay, the majority of stuff. And I glance down, I got my apron on with my lobster on the front, you know, and I glance down and I swear, I posted this on social media, so I'm not making this up. I posted the screenshots. It said, drones over the golf course, right? I'm like, what? I'm like, what? And I pick it up, and neighbor 1, neighbor 5, neighbor 11, neighbor 20, they're all posting, yeah, they're going west, they're doing this, and there's 20 of them. Over the golf course, that's next to my house, right? Literally. And I run outside, take my steak off the thing, and I run outside. There's nothing there. People are going to want to see what they want to see. What, or did I miss it? I don't know. But I can tell you that when everybody was posting this, I was outside looking. And I thought about, what is it that they are seeing that they're turning into drones? Follow me? Right?
Yes.
And over New Jersey, and a lot of that stuff that I saw was obviously an airplane, but people are going to want to see a flying car sized drone. You know what I mean? And now, and that's when you mix it up with some of the, I did interviews with, I want to move on, but I did interviews with all of the media out there, right? They contacted me and wanted my opinions on this. And you know what I said? And a couple of them picked up on the quote. I said, if you're ET, you mix it up right now. Go stir it up with the drones. Hide, blend in. That's what you do. If you're the military, this is when you go and do your testing. When there's all these questions going on, mix it up, blend, you know, and I really think that part of that is the case.
Yes, I think so. I mean, obviously people get frustrated because there's been a fair amount of what we could call soft disclosure in the last few years, that people know there's something going on. People know that there's retrieval of materials that are being studied by military intelligence. And people get frustrated because we're not being included in that conversation. And so people are desperate to see something that they can say, okay, now I have seen something, or I have touched something, or I've had a contact experience, because we just don't like being left in the dark.
Is this when those powers go, all right, time for a false flag? You know what?
Well, yes, I hear that. I personally, I don't think the groundwork has really been done to make a fake invasion work. I just don't think you would get the buy-in. We've had too long of the other story where we're not to take any of this seriously. And I don't think enough people have really bought into the idea that we're in company for a fake invasion to work. It may seem that way to people who follow the topic because we tend to talk to each other, and we may feel there's more momentum than there really is in terms of people believing that we're in company. So no, I'm not sure we're quite ready for War of the Worlds rerun.
I'll tell you another crazy thought. I want your opinion on this. You remember when we had the shoot downs, right? When we were firing missiles at UAPs a few years ago?
Yes.
Over North America, right? Where we are shooting missiles at stuff over the United States and Canada. That's some crazy ass shit. I mean, like, that's taking it the crazy to a whole nother. Okay. But that's what we know about. How do we know what's going on with a ship or a submarine out in the middle of the Atlantic or the Pacific? They can do whatever they want. There's nobody to witness it. There's nobody there to videotape. There's nobody there to, you know what I mean? And the amount of contact that could be happening with our Navy around the world is, I think the odds are quite high. And if they shot something down, that false flag or whatever that we're talking about, it could happen and they could make up their own story because nobody's there to call them on it.
Well, that's very true. I mean, so most of us are really left sort of trying to pick up the crumbs and, put the cake back together to see what the picture is. But there have been some really interesting crumbs in the last few years. When we see that someone like Jacques Vallée is allowed to speak to the public about work on trying to reverse engineer metamaterials, or we hear that from the American physicist Eric Davis or Gary Nolan, if they are allowed to say that in public, then you have to think, well, that must be the tip of the iceberg in terms of what artifacts have been retrieved and what work is being done and how far forward are we in that work. You see, if that's what's in the public, you know that there'll be much more that is not permitted to be spoken of. And I don't know if you recall Haim Eshed, the brigadier general who for 28 years was Israel's chief of space security. He made an amazing statement back in just before Christmas 2020. He published a book, was it The Universe Beyond the Horizon? And he said that on the basis of his information, now bearing in mind, it was his job to know if we were in contact, and it was his job to know if there was any kind of threat. And he said on the basis of his privileged information, his understanding is not only have we had materials, but we've been given these materials. These aren't all from craft that have crashed. There is collaboration going on behind the scenes, he said, and has been for more than 80 years. It involves at least military intelligence units within Israel and the USA. And when he made that statement, he said, if I'd said this a couple of years ago, I'd have been whisked off into a hospital somewhere. And I thought, yes, well, that's probably fair. However, since he made that statement, he's been under house arrest. And the fact that that is the response tells you, there's something to see here. And so we're trying to put these pieces together of working out, well, how much contact, how much conversation, who are we in contact with behind closed doors? How far forward are we in reverse engineering? Do we have any access to space beyond our solar system? Who is representing us in these conversations? What decisions are being made? In whose interest are those decisions being made? There's so much we don't know, but would really want to know. And that's where we're at, those of us who sort of follow this story, who pay attention to the news and connect the dots. And I think that group is getting bigger and bigger. I think this conversation is becoming more and more mainstream, but we need it to go far more so if we expect any kind of accountability on these topics from those who are working behind closed doors.
I believe that thousands of years ago, E.T. had a relationship with this planet. Okay, I do. Different species from different parts of the universe. I don't think it was one, but it was an open relationship. But my question to you is, do you think that that relationship continues to this day with the governments around the world?
I do believe there is covert contact, yes, and it may be face-to-face contact behind closed doors. And you're right, Jimmy, this is very different to the world as described to us by our ancestors. On my trip to Turkey recently, I was listening to stories that are 3,000 years old from the Urartu people who lived in that part of the world. And they describe a time when their ancestors had what you and I would call ETs living among them, right, and going about their business and helping the human population to learn stuff from them. And that's not a unique story. You find the same in the Bible. You find the same in Mesoamerican, Mesopotamian story. There was a time when there was an ET presence that was overt, that was visible. They were here with their technology. And then at some point, they left. So in the Bible, you get to 1 Samuel 8. That's when they all leave. And after that, you're trying to get remote communication going with who was here before. Same in the Mesoamerican story. You get to the Jaguar dynasty. In Mexico, they're trying to do remote communication with the feathered serpents who used to live among us. So yes, there was a big shift thousands of years ago to perhaps we were being governed by sort of viceroys, deputies who were here on their behalf. Perhaps they left behind royal bloodlines who would govern in their interests. We're now at a place where there is not visible contact. There's not a public acknowledgement of company, but I think there is face-to-face contact behind closed doors. And I agree with what you're saying, Jimmy, that when we listen to ancient stories, it sounds like, oh, you've got 1 or 2 ET demographics competing in running Project Earth. I now think it's many, many more than that. I think it's a lot of demographics. I don't know if you remember Dmitry Medvedev, the previous prime minister of Russia, when he was caught on that hot mic.
I watched that
talking
50
to the journalists.
times. Yeah, I watched it 50 times with my Russian parents.
Having said, go on.
No, they were translated. They were in shock.
Oh, beautiful.
The Russian community, oh man, that got
so there he
on
is.
Russian TV constantly.
In case anyone missed it, there he is saying to this journalist, every new prime minister is given a dossier detailing the ET civilizations we're already in contact with. And she says, oh, how many? And she says, oh, I don't want to tell you that because it would panic people.
Yeah, the cameras are still. The cameras are still. It was on a talk show, and they were supposed to go to a break. They didn't. They continued talking, but the mics were still hot, and he literally. And so, here in the United States, I haven't talked about this much. This was a big deal to me, though. This was. I'm going to guess and say 2008. Like right,
Yes,
it was like right in there.
2008.
And here in the United States, it didn't catch on to the news. All right. But Russian television, which is broadcast around the world, of course, but the Russian people, they all heard it. And those talk shows, and let me tell you, you think we have talk shows here in the States? You ain't got nothing on Russian talk TV. Oh, that's a whole nother. And they really picked up and covered this story. It was a big, big deal in Russia.
It's so interesting that if you want to hear authoritative voices talking about ET contact, you can go there. Now, he was prime minister at the time when he made that statement, wasn't he, in 2008?
Yes, he was.
And then he got moved on sometime after that. But he wasn't debunked by Putin. Putin didn't go on and say, I have to distance myself from the
Nobody did. No, Paul, nobody did. Yeah. No, everybody was more like, holy crap, this shit is real. That's what the conversation was. Nobody called out Dmitry, and nobody from the Kremlin. No, it didn't happen that way.
So he's a pretty senior figure. And then, of course, for some years, we had Paul Hellyer speaking freely, who was the former Minister of Defense for Canada. Alain Juillet, the former chief of French intelligence, authenticates that the USA has had units doing reverse engineering work. Pretty credible figure. And then who was the other? And of course, not Dmitry Medvedev, the Brigadier General Hermashed that I just mentioned, former chief of space security. So this is very close. It's just 1 degree removed from having the person in the position saying, I am now making an official statement on behalf of the government. It's just 1 degree removed. So if people are following the story, there are now a lot of credible voices who have talked about contact, collaboration, legacy program, for us to know that something real is going on. When I was growing up, when I was a boy, if I wanted to hear people talking about UFO encounters, it would always be some poor person who'd had half a dozen beers and then saw something funny over their farm. There was always a reason not to take the witness seriously if you were watching the TV back in the day. Now we've got credible people bringing credible information. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, because it's only the bit we're allowed to know that we're hearing.
And I feel that the reason why that is today, it's how we live now. But back, if you go back 2,000 years, I'm pulling a round number up, but 2,000, 3,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, if you wanted to go over that mountain and see what was on the other side and be the first person to do it, you would encounter something new. Different culture, different people, different eating habits, dress differently, all that stuff, right? And if you were going to get on a boat and sail over the horizon, what is it that you would encounter? You expected that. So you go over that mountain. You come over the other side. There's a flying saucer sitting there with ET walking around it. You're not thinking that.
No.
You're just thinking, let's make friends.
Yes.
That's cool.
Yes, that's right.
You know what I mean? And today, no, we don't think that way.
No, that's a great point. So when you listen to ancestral story, often what you will have described is people from the sky. They won't have the language of outer space or deep space, but they will say sky. They will say flying. They will describe craft.
Heavens.
The heavens, exactly. So that word in the past, really, you could say that means sky, deep space, outer space. But we have to accept all they're telling us is what they saw, and they're trying to describe what they saw. As soon as you and I picture what they're describing, that's when we think, hang on, this is technology, this is extraterrestrial. And there are some great examples of that in the Bible. So in the book of Exodus, for instance, there is this pillar or column that is surrounded by fire and cloud, and it can launch and land. And when it launches, it's the sound of many waterfalls, and it shakes the ground when it lands. Well, if you and I picture that, we're probably picturing SpaceX launching and landing vertically. But in the past, we've read those texts, fiery, cloudy pillar. We think we're reading a religious text, and so we try and make some metaphor of it. Instead, we need to read these stories and say, let me draw a picture of what he just described. And you can do the same in the book of Exodus. You can do the same in the book of Psalms, book of Ezekiel. You start approaching the text that way, and you'll realize there's technology being described. This is this whirlwind wind is what we would call a wormhole. This hole in the sky is what we would call a portal. We have language today, and we have other things we can refer to. So though back in the day, you might only have, oh, that looks like a shield, it's a flying shield. Today, we've got other references to say, oh my goodness, I think I know what I'm looking at.
Is there a part or a culture of the world that intrigues you more than that ET might have had more of an interest geographically?
Oh, that's a great question. If I approach that via the present and ask the question, what parts of the world are our military intelligence units interested in going to because they think they'll find ancient technology? Interestingly, that will take you into Iraq. And if I were to ask that question on the basis of biblical hermeneutics, you'd go to exactly the same place. So if you want to find in the Bible something that looks like portal technology or Stargate technology, you'll go to the Shinar Plain in Genesis 11. That's Iraq. So that is one very interesting place, which if we all had the freedom to wander around, it might be full of people like you and me working out what we can find. Although I think a lot of artifacts were removed just over 20 years ago and taken to other places for analysis. But that's certainly one place on the planet that is deeply, deeply interesting. And another place I think that merits much more study is ancient Armenia, the Ararat region, because so many narrative traditions around the world point there and say that's where the human story was rebooted after the Younger Dryas. And so many of those stories suggest we rebooted with ET assistance. So I want to spend more time personally in that part of the world, listening to the local lore, the local folklore, seeing what's been left in terms of cuneiform scripts that have been left behind, carvings that have been put into basalt for future generations to understand the stories. And there may be other artifacts too that we will find to say, yes, there was contact here, and we see all the aftermath of it.
We look at Armenia today as this tiny little landlocked country with 1 million people in it. Armenia in history went from sea to sea, the Armenian highlands.
Yes.
Modern day Turkey, Syria,
Yes.
That was all Armenia.
That's right.
For 10,000 years. Not for some little, no. What we're dealing with now, Göbekli Tepe being in Turkey, it's not Turkish. That thing was built in the Armenian highlands 12,000 years ago. And here's another fact. Little tidbit. You ready? Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Can you handle it?
Go for it.
In Venice, there is an Armenian church. Oldest church in Venice. It's Armenian. At that monastery, at that church, they have a gift from Armenia. You know what that gift is? Look it up. It's a 7,000-year-old bronze dagger made 4,000 years before the Bronze Age. Now, somebody tell me how. So if you go, that's why Armenia is so special.
Yes.
and people don't. Karahunj,
Yes.
you know about Karahunj?
Oh my goodness. I think that is one of the most important sites, archaeological sites on the planet, because at
Period.
Karahunj, what we
Period.
have is evidence of civilization, at least during the Younger Dryas, maybe before and after, because it's now estimated by archaeologists that it's an observatory, of course,
It
oriented
is.
on Cygnus. And the current estimations are that it was constructed 12,000 years ago and then rebuilt. Why it would need rebuilding? Well, you're talking about the Ice Age, 8,000 years ago. So that site straddles what I believe is 2 iterations of human civilization. So
You are
that's
correct.
one of the places I want to go and spend some more time.
Karahunj is Armenian for
The
Stonehenge.
speaking stones. That's right.
Yeah. And so Karahunj, that's what it means. And so, but what, and everybody listening right now, look it up, just go for it and be prepared to have your mind blown and go down that rabbit hole. There's a couple of little things about it. One, the stones, as Paul just pointed out, are astrologically aligned. They have holes in the stones that you line up and look through at different objects in the night sky. They had to modify it after a few thousand years because the friggin' sky moves. Where does that intelligence come from that long ago? That's number one. It's crazy. Number two, there is a wall next to Karahunj. Okay, it's a stone wall with metal, bronze faces, 8,000 years old. Who was smelting what 8,000 years ago? Somebody just help me understand this. Karahunj is one of the most important places on this planet, and it's completely ignored. You can walk up to it today. There's no fence. There's nothing.
That's exactly what I found in Turkey as well. These earth-shattering sites, no sign pointing to it, no fence around it, but the significance of these sites is enormous. And you can go back to the classical period. Roman historians, Greek historians knew about the significance of this area. They knew that these metal technologies were pioneered in ancient Armenia. So it's been known about for a long time, and yet the information has not been treasured in the same way that perhaps the pyramids at Giza have been treasured, or, you know, the recovered sites in South America have been treasured. I really think that what is now Turkey and Armenia, I think those sites are going to take off. People are going to discover them, at least because of this awesome book coming out. On the 15th of March, because I point to these places and I say, these have been forgotten for too long, because they hold a vital piece of the puzzle if we want to understand where we came from.
Yeah, it's Armenia. It's not the Kardashians, you know, and I hate to say it, but pop culture has taken hold of Armenian culture and twisted it up. Once you find out about the kings and how far back it goes, and certainly even with, they have the oldest monastery on the planet. Think about that. What, you know, it's not in Italy. It's not in Jerusalem. It's in Armenia. That's crazy. Okay,
that's right.
So when
and
we come
the oldest vineyards as well.
The oldest everything. They have the oldest written language, the oldest alphabet. You know, it's crazy. It's like it's crazy, man. It's absolutely crazy. All right, let's take our break right here, Paul. Stay right there. Now, when we come back, we bringing all of this up, we have to talk about Ararat. And I'm not talking about the liqueur. Okay. I'm talking about the mountain. We'll talk about when we come back. Our guest and I, Paul Wallace, we are talking about the truth about ET contact. All of that and much more right after this. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get your alerts and access to over 2,000 videos. Click that subscribe button right now. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and get the Fade to Black official podcast. 2,000 episodes, all of them commercial free for just $2 a month. Watch Into the Vortex on Gaia TV. It's Fade to Black for the screen. Simple to do. Go to Gaia.com, search Jimmy Church, or click on the link below. Follow Fade to Black on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Get all of the show updates every single day. It's now called X, but who cares? How you doing? Jimmy Church here. Special announcement. Get your Fade to Black t-shirts. That's right. Help support the show. Help support everything that we do over here. We've got 2 t-shirts. We've got 2 ways to get them. Get your Fade to Black t-shirt today. Go Backley Tappy. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and become a Fadernaut. Get a membership. That's right. Everything is commercial free. You have access to downloads, and you get to call yourself a Fadernaut. Today we're headed to Bolivia, Tiwanaku, Peru, and of course, Pumapunku. Brian, exciting. Thank you so much for everything, my friend.
Always an honor. Right behind us is the sacred river of the Inca that goes past Machu Picchu. So we're going to be driving up to its source at 15,000 feet above sea level and then down to Lake Titicaca.
So today we hit 15,000 feet.
Yes.
Crazy. And you can do it with us. All you have to do is go to hiddenincatours.com. Simple. We've got 2 tours coming up next year, one in June for the summer solstice, right? And then another one right here in November. So hiddenincatours.com. Come and hang out with Brian and I and his amazing team.
Right on.
River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right. Welcome back. Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Paul Anthony Wallace is back with us. Another great conversation. And Paul, so I want to talk about the Eden book series, and we'll dive deep into that next. But I just wanted to ask you, what is your belief about Noah's Ark and Ararat? Do we take it literally? Do you think that's where Noah came aground?
I think there were flood events that were part of our experience. And I think it's probably the Younger Dryas event that's being described, because there were flood events, fire events, and a great and terrible winter that all comprised that percussive episode in the planet's story. And again, the correlations between the Noah story, the Zisudra story, Atrahasis story, Utnapishtim story, tells me that there is something very important and real and traumatic that's been remembered by all these different cultures using all these different names. They all describe a devastation and a person having to survive with livestock and plant life and their family to ride out this storm. It's echoed in Persian story, which I think is earlier still, that is a warning about this great and terrible winter. Ahura Mazda warns Jamshid or Yima to take his people, livestock, seeds underground to ride the winter out. So I think something real happened. I don't picture it as a global flood where the whole planet is underwater all of a sudden. I think there was massive inundation all around the world that has been remembered by different cultures. So there were different flood events. You can hear about flood events in Aboriginal Australian story, Native American story, but there was something that happened that I believe landed a small population at Ararat, and that there was a repopulation from there and a rediscovery of agriculture and megalithic building from there, because we have so many vectors pointing there. The book of Ezekiel identifies the high country of the powerful ones, and Urartu or Ararat means the high country. You've got the biblical story of Noah pointing there. You've got the Babylonian story of Zisudra pointing there. So yes, I think something real happened in history. There was a repopulation from Ararat in ancient Armenia, and the migration that has been tracked through DNA research and the progress of megalithic building that's been tracked through archaeology confirms that. There was a great leap forward there. Paleo-agriculture, the same. It's in southeast Turkey that the first known farm was identified by Manfred Hoyne and his teams from the University of Norway in Aarhus and the Max Planck Institute. All these vectors are pointing to the same place and says, yes, we rebooted from there. So yes, I think something real happened in that place.
When I look and visit these amazing sites that include North America, I mean, they're around the world, but they're everywhere if you know where to look and what to look for. But there is something there that has been frozen in time and preserved for us. And it's left to us to figure it out. We're struggling with it today. And I loved the Da Vinci era of the 2000s, right? Da Vinci Decoded, and all that stuff, right? But what it allowed people to think about is, you know what? There's stuff there. We need to try to figure it out. Well, in the Eden series of books, have you decoded a secret? Is there something you can share with us that you feel pretty confident about?
Yes, absolutely. And in the latest, the Eden Enigma, it is very much about decoding the symbols that have been left behind and interpreting the stories left behind in cuneiform inscriptions. And one of the most famous codes or emblems that I go to is the famous pine cone and handbag of the gods.
Okay.
And there's lot of chatter all around the world about what that might mean. And a lot of people think, well, this is pineal activation. This is a cognitive upgrade. This is an ET intervention in the human story. Now, all that might be right, or it may refer to all those things. But I believe the primitive meaning of those items is shown in the carvings to be found in Iran and Armenia and Turkey. And what we are shown there is very specific. And what we're being shown is the hand pollination of plants. This is the story the Urartian people 3,000 years ago wanted to tell. And people might listen today and think, what? We're talking about the whole of human history. We're talking about the question of whether we've got company in the universe, but what they've drawn pictures of is hand pollination. What's that got to do with anything? You drill down into it, what it has to do with everything is that is the blue touch paper of civilization. Because after the Younger Dryas Cold period, the ecosystem was shot to pieces. There was no farming. There was no prosperity. They couldn't get their plants to grow. They didn't have the flying insects to pollinate. So they were on the brink of extinction. And what these advanced others did, the Urartians called them the Tingir, was they came alongside human beings and they showed them how to hand pollinate plants. That means you can bring plants from elsewhere and begin to create new strains that can prosper in the new environment, and you're rebooting farming, rebooting agriculture. And you need agriculture before you have a settled community. You need agricultural surpluses before you have a specialized society. And once you're there, you can begin progressing in the other sciences and doing megalithic building. And the archaeological record shows that those two things went hand in hand, being rebooted in ancient Armenia and then migrating into the Baltic states, into Northwest Europe, into Scandinavia, Iceland, into Northern Ireland. These carvings tell us the vital education that was given us by another civilization to relaunch the human story. So that's probably the most important thing I think I've decoded in the Eden Enigma. And the other symbol is the sun cross, which in the case of ancient Armenia and Scandinavia is a reference not to the sun, not to the seasons of the year, but to the craft in which our helpers came before they started teaching us horticulture and agricultural science. So those are real vital pieces of the puzzle. I show the data, I show where these carvings are, and then I show the logic for interpreting them this way.
Okay, too many questions. So let's just start with something basic. Why do we have the pine cone at the Vatican?
Oh, that's a great question. I think because those two emblems did become sort of a totem of all the upgrades that our visitors gave us. So the beginning of it is hand pollination, the reinvention of agriculture. But then I think those items become a shorthand for all the upgrades that came to the human experience with this intervention. And I think that does include intellectual upgrades. It's about human progress. It's about ascension. And the architects who produced the Corte della Pina at the Vatican knew this. For them, that was what the pine cone represented. It represented human progress, human wisdom, human ascension. But really the scandal around that is the architects knew, the people who commissioned the architects knew, but the mainstream of the church haven't been taught anything about cognitive upgrades or what the pine cone has meant in the past. In mainstream Christianity, there are chunks of the church where the pursuit of knowledge has actually been frowned upon. I mean, some of our greatest scientific pioneers were opposed by the church. And very often you'll hear the thought, how does that verse go? Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, he will direct your paths. And the way that's been preached from the Proverbs is that Christians shouldn't think for themselves. They should believe what they're told. And in portions of the church, you're expected to give what's called implicit faith to the church, which means you make a commitment to believing whatever they'll tell you in the future. So the scandal is that part of Christianity is don't think about anything, don't try and progress human knowledge, you know everything you need to know, while the higher ups who are busy commissioning all the art and architecture for the Vatican know full well there's another story here that is about improving the human condition and improving the human mind. And I do get into that in the Eden Enigma.
Somebody should have told that to Archimedes before those Romans kicked down his front door and stabbed him in his bathtub in the name of the church. But that's a whole nother story. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. And up until 1600, you've got the church putting people under house arrest because they are advancing cosmology, or burning them alive because they've suggested the cosmos might be populated. So, I mean, thank goodness we're not there now. And in fact,
we're close. We're close. Don't hold your breath.
I know what you mean. But I've got to give credit. Got to give credit to the Roman Catholic Church, because in 2009 it was the Roman Catholic Church that told people all around the world they should have another think about a populated cosmos. And it was representatives for Pope Benedict XVI who said we should be make ourselves ready to encounter a brother or sister alien, be ready to welcome them, and we shouldn't be surprised to meet them.
Yeah.
Be ready to baptize them. That's right.
Yeah.
And shouldn't be surprised because they're in the Bible. So at least the Roman Catholic Church has sort of made that little act of correction and said, maybe the universe is fuller than we suggested back in the day.
Yeah. It just makes me feel so bad for Galileo.
Oh, for sure.
And so many, that just went with what their eyes were telling them. Right.
Yes.
And not what doctrine was insisting that, they toe the party line.
They follow the data. And I should say, just to hold on that theme for a moment, that a lot of believers find themselves in a similar position today, that if they have seen things that are not part of the story that their church likes to tell, they can't talk about it. They might see things in the text, they might have close encounter experiences, but a lot of people are still feeling, I can't tell anyone about this because it's a taboo story. There's no theology to support it, and my friends and family will think I'm crazy. And this is one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about writing about this, because I think we all need to be at the table, being open and honest about what we're experiencing and asking the questions, all right, what does that do to my worldview?
Yeah, and don't pretend you have the answers.
No, that's right.
Yeah, don't pretend you have the answers. Now, what about the handbags at Göbekli Tepe? Those would predate everything that we're talking about here. Or maybe not. I don't know.
Well, the handbags at Göbekli Tepe, they are interesting. They are not part of the pairing that we've talked about before. And at the end of the day, what we're looking at is essentially a bucket. Should we be surprised that a bucket might be seen in that context? Göbekli Tepe seems to be a celebration of the ecosystem. All kinds of plants and animals are portrayed there. Maybe the bucket has the same meaning there, but it's separate from the applicator, and we're not shown what's in it. But I do connect the dots. I go to ancient carvings in India, for instance, and suggest, yes, this connection between the bucket and pollination is there in India, it's there in Turkey, it's there in Armenia. It may well be the same meaning that's there in Göbekli Tepe, and it's been appealed to by these later cultures. But I want to go there. I haven't been there myself, so I want to go and investigate it.
Yeah. I'm gonna get out there next year. I can't wait for that. But here's the thing. The symbol is the same. And that symbol was used over and over and over again. Exact. Not a facsimile. Exact. We have it in Central and South America. That's not coincidence.
Right. No, it's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence. And I think it refers, it's the same deep story of the recovery of the ecosystem and the help that we were given when that was necessary.
But then it would suggest, which goes against all anthropology and history and everything, that these cultures communicated.
Yes,
That's it. There isn't another
yeah.
way to look at it, is there?
I think the clues are there, that there is an earlier iteration of civilization than we know about, and it was connected globally. And I think the ancient carvings strongly suggest that, and also the alignment of ancient sites would suggest that.
Have you been to Tiwanaku?
No, I haven't yet, but
What?
this
How can
year,
you write the Enigma and not have what? Okay, the
well,
show's over. Paul,
the
get back
Enigma,
to me. Get back to me
the,
after you visit Peru.
I'm going this year. But look, the
Okay, good.
Enigma is very specifically about Turkey and Armenia.
I'm just pulling
And
your
this
leg, but
year,
here's the thing.
I know you are, but I'm going with Matt LaCroix and a fantastic team. Brian Foster's going to be there. I'm going to be in Peru and Bolivia this year, making the
What month?
connections for myself. April. Yes, it won't clash with yours. Don't worry, Jimmy.
No, I was hoping we were going to be there together. I thought, man, that would be cool.
Oh, that would be cool, wouldn't it? So
Yeah,
next month, I'm making that trip and joining Matt LaCroix's team.
Okay. Well, in Tiwanaku, when you come around and you're in the temple complex, there is the famous subterranean. It's below the four walls of all of the faces from around the world. And when you go in there and you look, now a lot has been said about this for sure, and your expectations are built up. You know, the gray alien, there's actually two there. That face, it does stand out, and it certainly looks like ET, but the expectations are high. It goes way beyond whatever your expectations are. I mean, you're here at 100, it's going to take you to $150. It's like that. And so when you walk around that, I don't know how many faces are down there, but when you look at the indigenous cultures there and you see what they look like and what they've talked about for a long time, and then you walk through there, everything from around the world is in those walls. Beards, turbans, different look, mustache, different construct. Everything is there. It's like crazy, man. Chinese, African, Middle Eastern, Northern Europe, the indigenous cultures from North, Central, and South America. They're all, including ET, are in those. And so you have to back up and go, who was coming through here? Or were they going there? This isn't guesswork. This isn't astral dream work, body projection, imagination stuff. They were showing us what they knew and who they've met.
That's right. And I mean, that was a major commitment to create that art installation in rock. So it really is intended as a message to last for the ages.
Yeah, I might have. Let me see. Hold on for a second. Hold on. If I can pull this up in 2 seconds, I'll show it to you. If I can't, we won't worry about it. But let me see if I have a Tiwanaku. Okay, I might have a movie. Let me see if this is it. Hang on. Okay. All right. You ready? Ba ba ba. Ba ba ba. This better work. This had better work. Okay. Tiwanaku. Okay, no image file there. So let me pull this up. I'm going to play it as a separate file. It's not a big deal. Here it is. Okay. Check this out. And I mean, for me, this is one of the things where you see this and you go, okay, wait a minute. I need this explained to me. I don't know if I'm going to have audio, but here, check this out. Those are all individual faces. That pillar right there, let me back up. Check this out. This is Göbekli Tepe, man, all the way. Look at the hands.
Oh, yes, yes.
Oh, I'll show you the gray alien. The gray alien, I've got pictures of it, is right there. See that?
Oh, yes, that face shape. Yes.
Look at that. And it's
For
different
sure.
than everything else here.
Yes, it is. Different color.
But each one of these guys, when you stop and you look closer at them, they're all different. And nobody knows who built this or how old it is.
Yes, I was going to say, what's the mainstream wisdom about the dating of that, I wonder?
And I'll show you some examples. And this goes right back to your Eden stuff that we're talking about. So let me pull this out. I'm really good at this, so I can actually get this done pretty fast. Boom, done. Click. You ready? Check this out. That's a turban.
Yes.
You know, and I just have a really hard time just making this out to be something simple. You know, what were they seeing?
Yes.
And you notice the face shapes are different.
That's
There's
right.
the Temple of the Sun right there, the Sun Gate. Okay. Yeah. This is Tiwanaku. There you go.
It's
If you need proof.
interesting because I really think that the visual art that's been left by cultures around the world tells a story. And if we took the visual canon as seriously as we take ancient texts, I think we'd have a very different view of the history of humanity on the planet. And you mentioned that that period in the early 2000s, you call it the Da Vinci period. That was interesting because that was a time when people were talking about centuries of art which had depicted events, objects that have never really been adequately explained by, you know, the commenters on art. We will look at a picture and we will see what looks like a flying saucer, what looks like a laser, what looks like a small gray. And there will always be some half-hearted explanation of, oh, well, that's actually a symbol of the sun, or that's how miracles were depicted back in the day. Why? Why were they depicted like that? And again, if you just see the picture and ask yourself, what am I looking at? There is a story that will emerge that has to do with technology and contact.
Whenever somebody says something like that, and I just use the word dolt, you know, I just go straight there. They are just trying to insert themselves into the story. They don't have the answers any more than anybody else does. Nobody knows. And I mean, nobody was there. You know, now we're left to try to decode it and figure it out.
Yes,
But
that's
you
right.
can't say with definitive fact that it's
Yeah.
this way or that way. You can't. And which takes me to one of the most interesting parts of this conversation and your research. There are no papyrus or written documents for any construction of anything megalithic anywhere in the world. You know, the greatest achievements.
Yes.
You know, they can tell us about who they taxed for wheat. Some mundane, you know.
That's right.
But But how about, and that goes with, that's Mayan, that's Chinese, that's everything in Iraq, Sumerian, Egyptian, Stonehenge. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Anything like, we don't know, do we?
No, that's right. It is a mystery. So, for instance, if you go to the Babylonian story of Oannes and the Apkallu, that's a story of what we would call an ET intervention that's been written to answer questions that the Babylonians were asking. And one of those questions is, how did we ever learn how to do this? How did we learn to create canals, to irrigate the land? How did we learn to build megalithic constructions? And they were asking that because, as you say, Jimmy, there was no, well, you go to the library, here are the papyruses showing how we worked out bit by bit, how to do the maths, how to do the civil engineering. There was a great mystery as to where this technology came from. And so Oannes and the Apkallu is written to answer the question. And you could say similar things all around the world. There is just this great gap of where did this come from?
I love that part, the mystery of it. And here, this is a fact. The two of the greatest things about ancient Egypt, mummies and mummification, and the pyramids and temple building. Both of those are deep held secrets because they didn't write that shit down. None of it.
No, they didn't. I remember going to Egypt many years ago, going to the Giza Plateau, going to the Museum of Cairo, and every so often I would see an object that was absolutely pristine and head and shoulders above everything else technologically. And if I asked the guide, whoa, what's this? Where did this come from? The answer would be, oh, that's pre-dynastic. So that, that's before the Egyptians we know anything about. Oh, so this is earlier, but it's better. Yes, okay. Well, what can you tell me about pre-dynastic Egypt? Well, they were mainly farmers. That information doesn't go together. Mainly farmers can't produce superior technology. And again, there's this great mystery. What was it? How was it engineered? Who engineered it? Why would farmers engineer something like that? And again, I'm with you, Jimmy. I think I'm suspicious of anyone who can tie it all together and say, this is that, this is exactly what happened, this is how it was done. The fact that there are huge question marks over where these things come from, that's the beginning of an exciting journey.
There is one I'm a huge fan of, Bob Baer. And Bob Baer is an Egyptologist here at the University of California, and he teaches. And he's amazing, right? I've taken his course, learned how to read and write hieroglyphs and the ancient Egyptian language. And he's amazing, but he's also full of crap. And he contradicts himself. Now, I love this guy. Don't get me wrong. And I'm not talking smack. But Bob makes it a point to say, there's nothing the pyramids and mummification and there's no written record and there's no markings on the inside of the tombs. And we don't know. Senefre, what he was doing. He built 3 pyramids. Was he buried in one of, but then Bob will say, we have no written record of anything, but then he will continue to say how it was done. He will say, there was no high technology involved with the Great Pyramid. And didn't you just say nobody knows? So what makes you the expert? Follow what I'm saying? And that goes with anybody, including me. Nobody knows. And it's one of those things left for us to decode and try to figure out. Peru was full of it too. It's everywhere. It's like all you do is scratch your head. Like, what? It doesn't make any sense. Now, what's your best guess on how these giant stones were moved? I mean, in
Oh.
any country.
Yep, and it will just be a guess because it's not something that I've applied a lot of study to. But I am interested in the theory that standing waves may have been used, and so the manipulation of objects through sound to move them and to affect the texture of them. I'm interested in pursuing that line of inquiry. I think there's something to that, but it's not something I've really made a thorough study of as yet.
This is my universal question that I do, and you can apply it all over the place. But when you go to the unfinished obelisk, right, at Aswan, and you can go there and you can stand above it and look at it. It's amazing, no question about it. But my thing is, and it's cool, it's like, okay, all right, but what was the plan?
Yes.
What was the plan?
Yeah. What were they going to do next?
Yeah, what was
Yes.
the plan? Did somebody help me understand this? We barely have ships big enough today that wouldn't sink with that on it. It would have to. Do you know how big of a ship you have to have that will displace 1,500 tons and not sink? You're talking about right? So unless the Egyptians had that, what was the plan? How are you going to get it out of the ground? How are you going to lift it? Even lifting it out and placing it next to the hole? What was that plan? I mean,
I know what makes it frustrating, of course, is that we can see the question, we can see the puzzle, but we don't seem to be finding artifacts of the technology that would move it, or the technology that would put it in place.
That's exactly right, which is my point. What's the plan? Well, we bring in a wizard, and he's got this giant horn. We create these standing waves, and the friggin' thing floats out of the hole. Okay. All right. Now I understand the plan, right? Okay. They had a plan. But right now, I don't know. Look at Baalbek. When you see that giant stone in the dirt in Baalbek, what was the plan? What was the plan?
Yes.
I need help with that.
And the two giant blocks that are already in place, 8 meters above ground level? How did they do that? You've got the outcome, but there's still where's the equipment that did this? And what was the equipment?
when the Greeks got there, they were like, "Oh, cool, it's already built. All right, let's build the temple right here. Let's move in some pillars." Because that stuff was already there. And in Tiwanaku, Pumapunku counts for this, and other countless locations in Peru. All of the oldest cultures there say that they inherited it. It was
yes, that's right. It was there before they got there. I think that I just find this so exciting because, without mystery, there's nothing to learn, is there?
Nope.
Without mystery, there's no place for your curiosity to go. And I think it doesn't matter what the white rabbit is that you choose to follow. It could be the white rabbit of megalithic building, could be the white rabbit of the Younger Dryas, could be the white rabbit of the legacy program today. Somehow or other, whichever white rabbit you choose, it will get you into the same rabbit warren where you begin asking questions about everything. And I actually think that's a great place to be, because I think curiosity is what makes us human. It's what's led to every advance we've made as a species. And so I just love all these topics because different people will click with different mysteries, but it will get them moving and saying, okay, now I'm willing to question some other things, because it's actually quite exciting rewriting your worldview?
Here's for me evidence of that even lately, I think is kind of tipping things over, where it was about 2 months ago, maybe 3. There was an announcement that some of the stones at Stonehenge didn't come from 60 miles away, which is easy for us to kind of process, easier, but 500 miles away. Now, 7,000 years ago, 5,000 BC, or whenever Stonehenge was constructed, 500 miles is a long way. For
Yes, it is.
for that, and then you just go right to Merlin. Was there some easy way of transporting these before the wheel, before metal? They didn't have chariots, right? No, stuff didn't exist. Not until Rome got there, that's for sure.
I think, I remember that announcement being made. I think the more we discover, the less confident we should be in the sort of meta-narrative that you or I were taught in school, that our ancestors were stupid and we're clever, because we keep finding evidence that human beings have been very clever for a very long time. We keep surprising ourselves. Oh, they were able to do that. Oh, they were able to do that. We might not know how. We might not know what the technology was that they used, but our ancestors were very capable people. And that seems to be the continual surprise that's going on. I remember when they found Ötzi, the Iceman, who was 5,000 years old and frozen in the Alps, wasn't he?
Yep.
In a glacier. And because of his age, what we thought we were going to find was some primitive person in bearskins wandering around going, ugh, this guy had done his own dentistry. This guy had all kinds of different textiles that had been stitched together. He was wearing insulated clothing. He had a medical pouch on his belt. It had his hair cut.
I think he had shoelaces.
He had shoelaces as well, and insulated shoes. So he was doing all the things that a sophisticated, intelligent, just as clever as you or me, and maybe more so, would have done with what was available to him 5,000 years ago. And again, it just blew apart this meta-narrative of ancients unintelligent, us clever. And of course, all the discoveries we've been making about Neanderthal humans, turns out they were a lot cleverer than we thought. And the human stories become far more interesting, I think, as we make these discoveries and realize, okay, we're looking at some technologies we can explain. We know how Ötzi did his dentistry. We know how he insulated his shoes. But then there's other technology we have no idea about that might be 100% human technology, like the pyramids, like lifting those blocks. But it's still advanced technology that we don't understand. I find that fascinating, and it makes me want to look with far greater respect to the cultures of the past and the stories they left behind them, because we often interpret their stories as if we're listening to primitives. And so for instance, I think we have this idea that our ancestors saw rain, and so they assumed there was a rain god. They saw storms, and they assumed there was a storm god. And that's the single story by which we interpret the stories they told us. And if we go at it that way, we miss what they're actually telling us, and that they might be telling us a more sophisticated story than we've allowed for. And that's really the bedrock of my research in the Eden series, going back to this folkloric layer and saying, what did they say? What was that image? What did they see? And just giving a second hearing to stories that previously we've dismissed because we thought they were all very unintelligent in the past.
It's because when you're taught and shown and fed a dogma, eventually that dogma to the masses turns into truth.
Yes.
And that's the pain of it, because you go to a natural history museum and you go by a diorama of Neanderthal, and he's got a club, he's dragging his wife by her hair, right?
That's right.
You know what I mean? And living in a
Yep.
cave, wearing, mammoth skin or whatever. And that's fixated. But check this out. A discovery was made in Europe of a 40,000-year-old grave of a brother and sister, the two of them, and they are buried head first. So their heads are touching and their feet, okay, all right, buried. In that grave, they found 10,000 little ivory beads. They were woven together to make a gown, a dress, a cloth that they were buried in. Now, let that sink in for a second. You should see these beads, by the way. They're beautiful. 10,000 of them. So, you want to tell me that Neanderthal or any 40,000 years ago species, human, Denisovan, it doesn't matter, had the ability to carve 10,000 beads for children to be buried in? Do you know what kind of work is involved in making 10,000 identical beads to make some?
Yeah,
that's an enormous amount of work.
That's right.
Precision,
It
just wasn't somebody with a club.
No. And that represents a whole culture. I mean, just those artifacts tell you there's a whole culture of craft making represented by those objects. And it's a very interesting period, 40,000 years ago. That's another extinction level event happened at that time, 42,000 years ago to be precise. So that's the Adams event. And just like at Göbekli Tepe, you've got the curation of a memory of the ecosphere at that time. If you go to France, to Chauvet and Lascaux, and look at the art that was created there, you've got a representation of all the animals that went extinct in France in that period. And the art there is not primitive art. It is beautiful, sophisticated, stylized art that again tells you there was a whole culture that these artists were part of who created this. And it's almost like a museum environment to commemorate what went extinct during that period. And I think it's like a parallel site really to what we find at Göbekli Tepe in many ways.
Do you find it strange? First off, I'm going to answer this question. I do. Do you find it strange where you see this 30 and 40,000 year old cave art, beautiful 3D depictions of animals in motion, right? Rhinoceros and lions and just this beautiful stuff. And then humans are stick figures. Right? It's weird. The animals are beautiful, and then you come to us and they didn't do it. It's always a stick figure. Is it because it was difficult or they didn't care? But they would do the handprints and the hand stencils.
Yes.
I have got a theory on that too as well. You know why they did the stencils? You know why they did the stencils?
Tell me.
You ready? You ready? You ready?
Go for it.
Look at me. A photograph.
Yes.
It's a photograph. You cannot, nobody, except maybe Michelangelo or Da Vinci, nobody can draw a hand that looks right. We all did it. We all messed them. You can't.
Yes,
you know how you do it? Stencil. And you are able to take for them. That was a photograph. You imagine that 40,000 years ago, blowing, right? And then taking it away. Oh, you're seeing a photograph of your hand. Think about that. They were much smarter than we are so lied to, Paul.
Yes, I think so. And to be fair, I think some of the stick figures, they're actually quite stylized images as well. So I think those images that we see show real sophistication. It's not the primitive work of primitive people. And the moment you're standing in those caves looking at that art, that's what will strike you.
Have you seen Werner Herzog's documentary on Lascaux?
Oh, I think I did many years ago, but I've been there myself more recently.
That is an amazing documentary. But okay, let's stay on this for a second. I'm not debating you. Okay, I'm not. I would never make myself look stupid. But I do that enough. But why were so many things incorrectly depicted? 6 fingers, 2 penises, right? Or whatever. I'm just making stuff up. But you know what? Why make those kinds of mistakes when everything else is so perfect and deliberate?
Yeah. No, that's a good question. I don't know is probably my best answer to that.
Fair
Other
enough.
than I think we see some things that are clearly representative and other things that are code. And so I just wonder if that might be part of the answer. But ask me in another 12 months and I might have a bit more to say.
Right. Well, I've been trying to, I'll let my imagination wander. But when you have all of this beautiful origin story stuff that is there and preserved and, telling us something perfect, and how much effort does an artist back then have to put into creating that instead of out killing something for dinner? Okay. There's no time for that. You have to survive the day. You have to survive the night, for God's sakes, right? So if you are going to put something on a cave wall, you're not going to screw it up. And we see a lot of evidence of that, or anything in Egypt that's carved, right, at a temple. You don't make mistakes. You put 6 fingers or 6 toes on something, it seems that somebody from the village would come up and go, dude, can you count? It's friggin' 5. You can't make mistakes. So there was a reason for it. I just don't know what it is.
Yes, I don't know what it is either. But it's interesting when you look at that art, it seems to me this wasn't like a part-time exercise that was done by a few individuals in between hunts. This is why I say it represents a culture. These were artists. This was their work. This was their skill. And they were allowed the luxury of the time to create this enormous installation. And Lascaux is an enormous installation.
Yep.
So it suggests you're looking at a settled society, a settled community that is already partway specialized. Because if it wasn't a specialized society, you wouldn't have art that looked like that. So that's why there's a whole lot more culture and civilization represented when we see those images.
Now at Lascaux, I want your opinion on this because you've been there. This is if there's a trippy thing. This is how my mind works, Paul. So laugh. We were talking earlier. I don't wear a mask. I'm a dick, right? Okay. So this is my dickiness coming out. You look at the Lascaux caves and you look at those paintings. Those artists had one crack at it. They painted it the first time. Perfect. They didn't erase. They didn't make any corrections, right? They didn't oops, right? No, there's none of that there. It's imagine if an artist today, a Da Vinci, a Michelangelo, right? Picasso, just laid it down the first time and said, okay, I'm done, and handed it off. No, man, they are just reaping. They didn't do that at Lascaux. And it's about as perfect and as beautiful as anything on planet Earth, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Absolutely. This is why I say they were real artists. One might say full-time artists. They're not hunters. They're not
Right.
People who are taking a break from surviving to do this.
Right.
There really is a specialized society needed before you see art of that quality. And who knows where they'd practiced to get so good before they did those caves. But you have to assume there's a whole background story of that kind as well.
Yeah, there has to be. And what was, and continuously occupied for 5,000 years, by the way. 5,000 years. The oldest thing in Australia is a burger stand that's 50 years old, right? If you know what I mean. And it's the same thing here. Think about that. 5,000 years of continuous occupation to have that representation of the animal kingdom. What was going through that valley? Everything, right? Wow. I mean, it's mind-blowing and so important to them that that's what they painted on the walls.
Yes. And I wonder what was happening when they painted that on the walls, because the period of Lascaux and Chauvet, because we can date the implements they used to create the art, this was a period in which the world was changing very, very rapidly. And so what was happening at that time is that the Earth's geomagnetic field had weakened. The North Pole had moved, the magnetic North Pole had moved all the way around to the South Pole. And you might think, does that really matter if you're not trying to sail around the... Yes, it matters, because while that's happening, you're being bombarded by ultraviolet rays at a greatly heightened rate. And we see the response on Earth to those shifts in a mass extinction and in a change in human behavior, because in that time, human beings started moving indoors. They started building structures, they started sheltering in caves, they started casing themselves in earth, in clay, because that was their sunscreen. So we do know that when that art was being created, there was massive change happening in Europe, happening on the planet, that had not been seen probably for about 30,000 years from the previous extinction level event. And so you've got all that story as well. And again, I think it points to there being a more substantial culture in place, a civilization in place that was being adversely affected by all these shifts. And this was a curation of memory that went into these installations. This is the world that is vanishing, I think, is the message behind what was painted there.
Yeah, to have rhinoceros and lions living outside of your cave.
In France.
It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
Where can everybody get the new book?
Go to Amazon and you will find, in paperback only, the Eden Enigma. And the subtitle of this book is Do Ancient Carvings in the Mountains of Turkey Carry Memories of ET Contact from the Dawn of Civilization? You can probably guess my answer to that question, but I actually go to some hard copy information in carvings and symbols that are 3,000 years old left in that region of the planet. And then I analyze that and we make a journey together.
Thank you so much, Paul. Always great having you on, my friend. And look forward to hanging out with you in Australia for sure and seeing you when you come over here. But keep doing what you're doing, man. Very proud of your success. And look forward to our next conversation. Thank you so much, Paul.
Thanks, Jimmy. You too.
Perfect conversation tonight. And again, everybody, Paul's website's also his TV network too as well. The links are below on our website and throughout social media. that's going to wrap another week here on Fade to Black. I'm heading into my weekend, but I've got a long day in front of me tomorrow, and I'll give everybody an update. But until then, have a great, safe, fun, and amazing weekend. I'll see you right back here on Monday. Go back, Lee Tappy. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Special thanks to Bill, John, Dex, Jessica, Dennis, and Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music by Doug Aldrich. Intro, Space Boy. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2024 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Go back, Lee Tappy.